Welcome back to DealBook this afternoon, where we have, dare I say, an epic conversation planned for you. We are joined right now by Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games, of course, the owner of Fortnite, which has changed the landscape, not just of gaming, but of society. And there is so much to talk to him about. Of course, he is in the middle of a battle royale with Apple, and so much more that's taken place during this COVID period. And I want to talk to him about all of it. So let us welcome Tim Sweeney to the conversation. Hi, Tim.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. There is so much to talk about and news to talk about today even, because Apple made a big announcement early this morning about the commissions it's charging in its App Store for small businesses, not necessarily for businesses of your size, but it is a central component and part of the conversation and debate which you've been having with Apple over these now several months about the commissions that Apple charges. And I want to start there with our conversation, if we could, just because I think we're all trying to understand what it means. So here's where I'd like to start the conversation, if I could. You made a very interesting decision to insert a piece of code. Apple would say surreptitiously insert a piece of code to effectively go around their commissioning of in-app purchases inside of Fortnite. Take us inside your mind when you did that, what you thought was going to happen.
Well, first of all, this is essentially an act of civil disobedience by Epic. We got to a point where Apple's deal wasn't just a bad deal, but we felt that the way they monopolize distribution of apps on iOS and payments of in-apps on iOS was having the direct effect of preventing competition and raising prices for consumers. And so what we did with Fortnite was we instituted a 20% price drop for people who used Epic's new direct payment method on iOS, so that we could pass some of the savings along from avoiding the Apple tax to consumers. And we brought this live in violation of Apple's developer guidelines. And for about 4 or 5 hours, this feature was live, and more than half of all Fortnite players purchased their V-Bucks and other digital items using Epic Direct Payment, going to all the effort of typing in a credit card just so they could get the savings, as opposed to using Apple Payment, which was already set up for them. And the goal is to really show to the world that Apple's monopoly and their terms are not just a matter of a distributor charging a commission. By excluding all competitors, they're inflating prices for consumers, and they're excluding choice and breaking the fundamental mechanisms that keep an economy in balance, which is competition, right? And this was our opening blow in the effort. There have been many since, but ultimately we feel Apple's policies must change. Not only are they illegal, but they have a huge distorting effect on the digital economy and are unfair to consumers and developers alike.
Okay, so let's break all this down and let's have a debate about it, because I think there's lots of different issues embedded in what's happening here. First of all, with the suit itself, what were you expecting Apple to do? I mean, was your view that you were going to win this in the courts, or you were trying to win this in the court of public opinion? I ask that because obviously the second you did this, not only were you able to actually move some of your customers over to your business, you had an advertisement ready to go. There was a whole strategy behind it.
Sure. Well, there are two very separate efforts. First of all, we're litigating this in U.S. federal court and now in Australia, potentially with more international arguments to come later. And then separately from that, we're also conducting an awareness campaign to make everybody, the press and regulators and consumers and Fortnite players aware of what's happening and why. And that's the reason for the 1980 Fortnite video, where we parodied Apple's 1984 commercial to really raise awareness of what Apple was doing in demanding total control of all distribution of apps.
So here's a legal question. Do you think that your company is the best position to make this case? And the reason I ask this is, typically when people make monopolistic or antitrust arguments, they define the market. They say, what is the market for this product? And uniquely and interestingly, in the gaming world, unlike actually some other software that perhaps only runs on mobile devices or lives much better in a mobile world, there's clearly lots of places that Fortnite and other Epic games that either use the Unreal Engine or other things live, right? Xbox, PlayStation, you can go down the list. And so from a legal argument around just market, do you think you are the one that's going to be the winner?
Well, I think we're one of many legal contests that will be mounted against Apple and Google. And our hope is just that somebody wins. It might be us, it might be others, it might be federal regulators, it might be international regulators. But any outcome that leads to Apple and Google opening up their platforms to true competition in payments and stores is good with us. And we're aiming to do our part by mounting this major litigation and major public awareness campaign. But any outcome that solves this problem is good with us. And the best outcome by far would be Apple just changing its policies and Google just changing its policies and opening up on their own, so that all of these complaints and concerns just go away.
So, but here's the thing that I don't understand. I ask this as genuinely as I can, which is, you developed Fortnite, obviously on your own platforms or for these other platforms, and then decided at some point that you wanted to develop it for Apple. There were terms. The terms were clear, I think. I don't think they changed. I don't think they got worse. I don't think there's an argument around a fraudulent inducement, so to speak, the idea that somehow there were certain terms that you came in thinking you were under, and then somehow the commission went up. In fact, I think the commission has always been at 30%. It's either been at 30% or now it's coming down. And so when you look, and obviously you've had a lot of success as well being on that platform. So philosophically, how do you think about that?
Well, normally contracts are honorable and binding agreements on parties. But when a contract goes outside of the bounds of the law, as Apple's doing, and has such a negative and pervasive impact on society, it's everybody's duty to fight. It's not just an option that somebody's lawyers might decide, but it's actually our duty to fight that. If we had adhered to all of Apple's terms and taken their 30% payment processing fees and passed the costs along to our customers, then that would be Epic colluding with Apple to restrain competition on iOS and to inflate prices for consumers. So going along with Apple's agreement is what is wrong. And that's why Epic mounted a challenge to this. And you can compare many, even to civil rights fights where there were actual laws in the books and the laws were wrong, and people disobeyed them. And it was not wrong to disobey them because to go along with them would be collusion to maintain the status quo. Right.
So what then is the fair answer? Is there a quote unquote fair price? You have a price in your app store. Would that be a fair price?
Well, what's fair is an open platform with competition, right? And if Apple wants to run a payment service and charge exorbitant rates, they have every right to do that. What Apple is doing that they do not have the right to do, they do not have the right to exclude other stores from competing with the iOS App Store. Apple doesn't do that on Mac, Windows doesn't do that, even Google doesn't require that everybody use the Android App Store as the sole means of buying software on Android. Apple alone, among major general computing platforms, forces people to use their store. And then as a term of using their store, you have to use their payment service, which charges a rate that's 10 times above market. MasterCard and Visa charge less than 3%. Apple charges 30%. And so they're forcing all of these uncompetitive services to be used. In a fair market, if Apple offered a 30% fee payment service, some developers might use it, most would not. And what we need is fair competition.
The argument that Apple would make is everybody has decided how they want to accept payments at different price mechanisms, meaning they would say 85% of the apps on the store are free. They service them for free. They provide that service for free. Developer software, you can use that for free. They don't charge for that. By the way, in fairness to them and to you, the Unreal Engine, I believe, you charge for the Unreal Engine. If you want to use the engine, you have a price. Apple's decided they're not going to take a cut of that, but the way that they've created the economics for themselves is to have this commission. So I'm just trying to figure out how you think about these things.
Companies sell products to consumers, and that's awesome. We sell our product to consumers and developers. Apple sells theirs. What's wrong here is the tying of different products and forcing, more than a billion consumers who've bought an iPhone to use only the Apple Store. Apple doesn't tell consumers when they buy an iPhone. Consumers don't sign a contract agreeing to only use Apple's Store. Consumers have no voice in this whatsoever. They purely force, through technical measures, that other stores cannot exist on their platform, right? And you can compare it to lots of different business models. Epic sells our engine to people, but there's a vibrant and competitive engine market. And most importantly, engines are not tied to other platforms, products, or services. Right. You can use Unreal Engine or you can use Unity Engine. If you use it, you can support dozens of platforms that both engines support, and you can move freely between them, and you can choose to adopt other services. You can use your own payment processing service. You can use your own social and friend system. None of these traditional businesses force customers, as a term of accepting one product, to use a whole suite of other products that are priced diseconomically.
But what about the argument, and we can put it in this context, Fortnite you talk about Fortnite as a platform. I believe the Fortnite platform right now is not open. There's not a competitive marketplace where others can effectively develop on top of the platform, can create their own in-app purchases right now, unless you want to make some news today.
Well, we're evolving in that direction. Fortnite started out as just Epic's Battle Royale mode, and now there's Fortnite Creative, where tens of millions of creators are sharing their content with their friends and with the general public. And there's a little bit of a business model there, but it's in the very early stages of development.
But could you ever imagine offering people, just whoever wants to sell on top of it and to give you nothing for it?
Yeah, absolutely. And for example, the Epic Games Store, we operate a game store on PC that's done hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions with customers selling third-party games. So we have a lot of experience with the costs and operating realities of this. And we do not require, as a term of using our store, to use Epic's payment service for in-app purchases. You can use our payment service and we'll charge you a 12% fee to Epic. That's our commission rate. Or you can use your own payment service and keep all of the revenue. Right. And I think that's the way that stores should operate. They're a bundle of services and each one is free to compete with each other. And we're happy to operate this store and to provide the service to developers, even if we don't receive money from it, because having customers regularly visit our store to obtain the software is incredibly valuable to us. But companies pay many dollars per user to acquire users to their store.
How important, though, do you think it is for you, for example, on your own game of Fortnite, to effectively control the platform, to control what happens on it from a quality control perspective and other things? I mean, part of the argument that an Apple would make, some would say fairly, I imagine you would say unfairly, is they say the phone, the product that you buy, the user buys because they want the entire experience. And part of that experience is a curated app store where they are preventing viruses and malware and other kinds of software. They're vetting all of that, and that the Apple consumer is buying into that. That's part of the value proposition. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Look, I think you're falling into the trap that Apple has set of conflating a whole bunch of separate things, right? Antitrust law isn't meant to govern the thousands of companies that are competing, fairly in a game market. There are thousands of games and multiplayer games competing with Fortnite. Users can move freely between each of them. There are exactly two smartphones used in the world. There's iOS and Android, and both of them have very similar terms, not identical, but very similar. And they use a tying strategy to force developers to accept a whole bundle of services. There's no competitive mechanism keeping these companies honest. Apple points to Google and says, if you don't like iOS, use Android. And then Google points to Apple and says, if you don't like Android, use iOS. But it's the same 30% everywhere. And the same store that's forced on users, through slightly different mechanisms. And when you're looking at antitrust issues, you have to make distinctions about whether are working competitive forces in the market. And as Fortnite grows, I think eventually we intend to grow into a platform where third parties can create their own content that's increasingly rich and powerful and interesting. And over time, we will open up more and more of it to users and to build a real economy around it. And the definition of a platform is that the creator of the platform is a minority participant in the economy of the thing, and that's exactly what Epic wants to be one day with Fortnite. But that's many, many years down the road. And I don't think you can apply the same rules that you would apply to a platform company serving 1 billion users with more than 50% market share in many major developed countries by revenue, and compare that to like Fall Guys or Among Us or Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft, where there's robust competition.
We just had Ruth Porat, the CFO of Alphabet, of course, the owner of Google, on with us. Do you have a view about the Department of Justice lawsuit against Google, in particular, the allegation, and this goes to the tying issue that you've been discussing to some degree, around the payments that Google pays to Apple so that they become the default search engine? And whether you think that if they didn't make those payments, Apple would otherwise be using a different search engine and it would somehow create more competition and people would be using a different search engine that's as good as Google's?
Well, Epic's not directly in the search market, and I don't have a really nuanced understanding of it. But, you notice that these monopolies, each in their own markets, tend to link arms together and form oligopolies, where Google is the exclusive default search provider to Apple. And there's an awful lot of cross-reinforcement. And Apple put out this study calling 30% fees the industry standard, and pointing out that Google also charges them, and every other company who has a monopoly on distribution of software on their platform charges them. To me, that's not a good argument, right? That's just showing that these tech companies are at least tacitly reinforcing each other's strength and position, and tacitly agreeing to divide markets and cooperate in areas where they could be competing because they're each respecting each other's turf. And that's exactly what's tearing our economy apart.
At the top of this conversation, I mentioned the news this morning that Apple has reduced the commission from 30% to 15% for small businesses with revenue under $1 million on that platform. What do you think when you heard that news today?
Well, first of all, it's a fantastic change for all these small developers. Apple said something like 98% of iOS developers make less than $1 million a year, and so are seeing their royalty rate reduced from 30% to 15%. Awesome for them, but who it's not awesome for are consumers, because 95% of iOS transactions are in major apps built by larger companies. And so, 95% of all transactions are still undergoing Apple's 30% fees. They're not seeing competition in payment processing or distribution. And so all these costs are still being passed on to consumers as a result of Apple's monopoly on these services. So I see it in some ways as a really great progressive improvement for these small developers, but also a cynical ploy to divide and conquer, right? Apple gave fellow tech titans like Amazon a special deal where they can pay 15%, and they just gave 98% of the developers who don't make much money this special term, and they're trying to preserve the tax on 95% of the others. And they hope that they can reduce the complaints to the point where they can get away with the scheme perpetually. And we're certainly not going to fall for that.
Is there a rate, though, a commission rate with which you would just say, okay, you were talking about credit cards earlier, 3%, 2%, 1%. I mean, is that what you think it ultimately, if there was a competitive market, you'd get all the way down there? And would you think that would be the case also for in-store or in-app purchases on your own platform in the future, if that were the case?
Well, first of all, I think what's most important is to have actual real competition on these platforms. Once you have competition in payments and competition in distribution and storefronts, then you have real mechanisms to keep companies honest. Until then, no rate is acceptable because it's not the rate that's the problem. Apple's 30%, they want to charge 30% for some overpriced service, go at it. They just can't exclude these competitors. But given our experience operating the Epic Games Store, we charge 12%, and we make a decent incremental profit on marginal profit on each transaction. Our costs are something like 2 to 3% for payment processing in developed economies, more in the developing world. 1 or 1.5% for customer service on providing support for payments, and maybe 1% for bandwidth that we obtain from Akamai or Amazon or other commodity providers. So the all-in cost of operating this service is 5 to 7% of revenue for Epic, which is really subscale, right? We're hundreds of millions of dollars. Apple is tens of billions of dollars, or hundreds of billions of dollars now. And so if we were operating at that economy of scale, I think a rate of 8% or less would probably be viable.
Oh, I want to pivot the conversation away from this piece of news to so much else that has gone on this past year, and also your own personal story. Right behind you, for those whose screen is big enough where they're watching this, you have what? That's an Apple IIe Plus?
Oh, that's an Apple II Plus. That's my
Apple
first
II Plus.
computer.
That was your first computer. You founded the company in your basement, your parents' basement, at age 20?
Yeah, that's right.
And what computer were you using then?
Well, I moved on to an IBM PC. But the wonderful thing about computers at that point in time is they're completely open. Anybody could write software. In fact, when you turned the computer on, a basic programming language prompt came up, so you couldn't really avoid writing code. And everybody was a programmer. Everybody wrote programs and shared them with their friends. Everybody was free to install software on their own. And I brought this out to remind me of what the industry was once like and must be like in the future. When all of these artifices of anti-competitive behavior are removed.
Tell us about how you see the future and how we will all live as a technologist and futurist. And the reason I ask is we are now living in a much more remote world, remote first, some people would describe it during this COVID period, and living inside, frankly, the metaverse of a Fortnite, for example, has become a huge part of people's lives. The idea of living in a simulation. We're doing it now to some degree, but what do you think that looks like 2, 3, 4, 5 years out?
Well, computers aren't just calculating machines anymore. They're now incredibly powerful devices that can connect people together into social experiences. And these real-time 3D social experiences are the best and most engaging of them all. They're going to continue to become a larger and larger part of our lives. And just as COVID has kind of taught people that actually it's okay to not travel and to spend a lot of time talking to people on Zoom or communicating with them in Fortnite. And it's not just like you playing this game as a solitary experience. It's you and your friends doing something together, just like my generation would go out in the woods and play in real forts, and this generation is now building virtual forts. It's a great thing, but the power of these ecosystem operators, whether it's Apple and Google or the social media companies, or if any of the game operators in the future turn to similar practices, you could have either a utopia of communities online or a dystopia where powerful corporations use their control over the medium to exert more and more control and influence over society and to capture for themselves the fruits of everybody else's labor, including the labor of creators and customers.
Well, so let me ask you about that, though, because obviously the social media companies are constantly criticized for some of the things that they're doing. They would argue that when they started, they had great intentions. There are big social implications. I would imagine when you started, you thought you had great intentions, hoping to better the world. There are lots of parents, as you know, and I have 3 children, who are very concerned about how much time kids are spending on Fortnite, how addicted they are to the game, what it's doing, frankly, people say, to their brains. What do you think of this?
Well, addiction is a serious problem. I mean, if you look at what happens with a heroin or meth addict, I would certainly not apply that term to people who love playing video games and sometimes play them more than they ought, right? Because if that's the case, then I'm addicted to programming, and my mom was addicted to gardening. Addiction isn't the right term for that. But I think you really have to look at what they're doing moment to moment. Are they playing a video game and doing mindless stuff that's not developing them as adults and negotiators and business people in the future, or is it a social experience? Because when I play these Fortnite Kill Squad games, I play always, I have a random name nobody knows, and I just go in and play online with random people. Playing these Fortnite games, it's about negotiation, it's about camaraderie, it's about conflict sometimes, and these are really healthy social experiences. And if we're not having them in the real world because the real world is shut down, then Fortnite is a perfectly fine place to hang out with your friends. And if you can't spend hours of real time together with your friends, and spending hours on Zoom or on Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox, I think is perfectly fine.
I should tell you that you are making the case my children make to me throughout this whole pandemic. They've said, Dad, you got to let us play Fortnite. This is how we're going to socially interact. This is, instead of going on a play date after school, this is our play date since we can't have it. I know you're not a parent, but when you speak to parents about this, what do they tell you and what do you tell them?
Well, it always comes down to what are these players really doing? They're having social experiences. A lot of them are using Fortnite Creative Mode and building stuff themselves and building stuff together with friends. I mean, these are really developing a new generation of, diplomats and business people and tech workers and artists and programmers, right? The skills that people are developing there are real in a lot of cases. And if you compare it to something like a mindless video game where you're just, Pac-Man, where you're going around eating dots by yourself, these are totally different experiences and shouldn't be compared.
Extrapolate out beyond the world of gaming for a moment, because we're all living on Zoom right now in the business world. But I'm curious how you think the world of simulation, if you will, looks 5-10 years out, not just as a game unto itself, but perhaps how we will interact in a virtual business environment of sorts. Do you see that?
These worlds are converging. And it's funny because this idea of convergence was discredited back in the 1990s when people talked about film and video games and other forms of media coming together. But it's actually happening for real now, and it's awesome. You see movie content debuting in Fortnite, musicians holding concerts in Fortnite, and Roblox now. And you're going to see more and more companies doing business online by reaching consumers with real-time digital content in a real 3D simulation. Like, can a car maker debut a car within a digital world and bring that car accessibly to, tens or hundreds of millions of people, where otherwise it would be limited to a much smaller group of buyers? I think all of these things can happen. We'll see major works of, film, television, architecture, automotive, all of these industries which are currently using real-time 3D as part of their enterprise, product development pipeline internally, are going to take all of these digital assets and bring them online and have awesome consumer experiences. And it's going to be a lot better than real-time, than
Right.
social media. On Facebook, Corvette reaches users by selling ads, but you can imagine, now they have a Corvette car configurator online, powered by Unreal. You can go in and see your car in real time. The next step of that is bring all of this content into the real world. And now you have brands reaching consumers without ads, right? None of this annoying ad stuff, none of this, invasive data capture that's used to power the ad economy. Actually have brands provide compelling content to consumers that they love engaging with. And I'll be happy to drive my Corvette around online in Fortnite if it ever comes. And though it's raising brand awareness, it doesn't feel negative to people like all of these other earlier forms of media.
Well, what is that going to? But you think that people you wouldn't charge money for that? So if Corvette decided that they were going to develop launch a car launch inside of Fortnite, but that became the norm, you think that wouldn't be something that you would try to monetize?
Well, what we need here is an economy where every creator is deciding on their own whether they're going to monetize and how. And you see the competition and the really interesting parts of the ecosystem will arise from innovation and everybody trying new things, not just Epic dictating you have to sell this or you have to give this away. And maybe it's you give a car away as a base model for free so everybody can enjoy it, but then you sell upgrades so you can get a custom paint job, like Fortnite does in order to maximize the player base, making the game free but selling upgrades. There's a huge amount of variety there that's all going to be explored in free competition.
You launched a series of concerts inside of Fortnite during this pandemic with remarkable success. I mean, the numbers were staggering. Did you expect that? And just explain what happened and where you think this goes, because we have a number of people in the music business that are online with us right now. I see people, senior executives in the film industry that are online right now. I mean, do you imagine people premiering movies inside of Fortnite?
Yeah, all these things will happen. Marshmello was the first major musician to hold a concert in Fortnite, and Fortnite got a big uplift from it, and he got a big uplift from it. It was entirely complimentary. And then Travis Scott did it. Then we found also the ability to hold much smaller scale concerts. Instead of spending many months developing a new experience, to hold some things almost weekly. And these blurring of the lines between different forms of media will continue. And yes, movie content will premiere in Fortnite. But I'm not sure it's just going to be a linear trailer or linear video experience, right? The thing that appears in Fortnite, for example, the Star Wars crossover with Fortnite. Yes, we showed a preview of the movie, but there was also this mode that took over the game world, and stormtroopers with crashed TIE fighters in the map. And it's the interplay between the movie created by movie creators for movie viewers and all of that content being reused in this real-time 3D environment that creates the magic. And you're going to see a huge variety of experiences crossing over in new ways like this.
As we've been talking, lots of people are in the chat asking different questions. So let me ask one to you that speaks very much to this issue. Jason Rapp asks, what were the economics of the Travis Scott concert? So do you have a model for how events like this work?
Oh, yeah, we've mostly approached these as custom negotiations because we're figuring this out as we go. We paid generally the costs of conducting the concert, and then we funded some degree of it by selling skins associated with the event and other items. We're still in the pre-economy phases here, right? This is one company negotiating deals with a number of suppliers and partners. We're still, it's not going to be until next year at the earliest that we enter an open economy phase in which independent creators can do all of these things on their own, right, to expose modes on their own, and start to develop business models around that in which you have a full open economy, that becomes more and more flourishing. Right. And we're going to get from here to there over time. And it's going to be stepwise. Right? There's not going to be a major thing where we go from where we are to the ultimate business model. It's going to evolve over time because we have to keep Fortnite growing from its stage today. It's mostly a battle royale game to a stage where it's an open platform for everybody without breaking it in between.
Okay, this is a hard, but I will say very smart question. You've talked a lot about wanting to have an open platform, being anti-monopoly. Can you speak to one of your owners? One of your owners, of course, is Tencent, based in China. They own 30% of the company, I believe. What do you make of the approach in China and the fact that that is a very regulated world?
Well, China's funny because it's actually, from the point of view of online services and China developed video games, there's intense competition. There are dozens of stores app stores in China operating on the Android platform that each are viable and have traction and are competing for developers in lots of different ways. Some competing on revenue sharing, some competing on marketing and other things. And so it's kind of an interesting contrast. On one hand, there's a very closed regulatory environment, but on the other hand, it's in many ways more laissez-faire than the Western economies.
Okay, here's another good one. Mika Music writes, there's a large portion of the gaming community that feels that microtransactions in general are bad for the gaming experience. Are standalone games without internal microtransactions history?
I think we're going to see a variety of models, but Fortnite shows that for an online experience, a social experience with other people, the best model by far is to have a game that anybody can get into for free. Because some people don't have money, some people can't spend money because of geographic concerns or economic concerns or age or any other limitations like that. But building a game that's free and then being able to fund operating it by selling things in the game that are optional is a great model. And I think there are honest versions of that and also dishonest versions of that. The dishonest version is you sell items that make players more likely to win, right? The pay-to-win model. Another dishonest version of that is loot boxes, where you sell people things without telling them what they're getting, and they try to buy over and over in hopes of getting the randomized reward that they get. But I think the most honest model of this is the cosmetic model that's in Fortnite and Rocket League, where yes, anybody can play the game for free, and yes, you can spend money, and yes, you can buy things to look cooler, but you're not ultimately getting an advantage over other humans. And I think that's a powerful model that's actually in many ways a lot better than the Google or Facebook model of giving away the product. So it's completely free and there's no way to pay for it, but instead they monetize you and your data and your privacy and your time. We'd much rather monetize people in monetize activity in the game in a completely mutually agreeable way, where players only spend money in Fortnite when they see something they really want and think it's a good enough deal that they buy it. They're never forced.
Okay, a couple more questions. By the way, I think I misspoke about the 30% stake that Tencent owns. It's actually 40%. Am I right?
It's something in that ballpark.
Question about Silicon Valley versus where you're based, which is Cary, North Carolina. Do you think there's been a real value in you not being in the Valley? Do you credit any of your success with that?
Yeah, being outsiders and being in a kind of our own space has been really freeing for Epic. And first of all, there are these boom and bust cycles in the game industry. If Epic had been next door to tech titans, then we might have lost some of our key people during some of our down years in between successes, and we might not be where we are today. But more importantly, we're not in the echo chamber of ideas and business models. They're just in Silicon Valley, and so we're able to develop an independent view of things. We have a very independent view of app stores, of advertisements, of data, of business models, and of the relationship between companies and their customers. And I think that's been very healthy. Okay,
two final questions. The first, what are your plans in a post-Fortnite world? Games oftentimes have a lifespan. Not that they're fads, but that there's an interest and then people move on to the next. Do you think that's going to happen, or is something changed in the gaming world?
Well, I think the days of any one static game experience are numbered. Fortnite Battle Royale will not last forever. There will be innovation in game modes, and somebody will find something better. Our hope for this is Fortnite as a platform for all creators to express their ideas using a common visual language and common control scheme and common social environment, and have dozens and dozens of different genres of experiences represented within this universe. And I think products that do that, looking at things like Fortnite and Minecraft and Roblox, which really have the opportunity, could last for as long as we're able to do an awesome job at it, right? It could be decades.
Okay, final question. If you were not playing an Epic-owned game, what game would you be playing?
I really love games like, Fortnite, Minecraft, Fall Guys, Among Us, games that, first of all, multiplayer games that have an experience that really encourages positive behavior online. These whimsical games that you never take too seriously, where even when you lose, you're still having fun and laughing at it. I think those games are wonderful and provide a great outlet away from the real world and all of the controversies in it.
Tim, I want to thank you for the conversation, for your candor, for engaging in this debate. And I know how rarely you do these interviews, so we are very appreciative. I said it would be epic, and it was. Thank you, Tim Sweeney, and thank you all for joining us and for your questions. We'll see you in just a little bit. Thanks, everybody.